Good morning. Coming to the second part of biostatistics. So we'll start from measure of dispersion. Measures of dispersion or variation give information on the spread or variability of the data values. Like we have already discussed how normal curves will form and how it looks. You can see here this is normal curve, but this is not a normal curve. Either it is kurtosis or highly skewed curve. In the main aim of any biostatistician is to calculate the mean, that is the center value. So after calculating the center value, we should also check the most extreme values, either the most lowest value or the most highest value, because it will give how the data is spreaded from low to high limit. So coming to the measure of dispersion, the first one is range, second is mean deviation, third is standard deviation, then coefficient of variation. Coming to the range is by far the simplest measure of dispersion. It is defined as the difference between the highest and lowest figures in given sample. For example, from the following record of diastolic blood pressure of 10 individuals, like 83, 75, 81, 79, 71, 90, 75, 95, 77, 94. It has been that the highest value was 95 and the lowest is 71. So the range is expressed as 71 to 95 or by the actual difference. The range is not of much practical importance because it indicates only the extreme values between the two values and nothing about the dispersion of values between the two extreme values. So after range, we will discuss what is mean deviation. I think you will be knowing what is mean because we already discussed mean, mode and median. And now we are going to discuss mean deviation. So it is the average of deviations from the arithmetic mean. It is given by formula, that is MD is equal to summation small bracket x minus x bar closing bracket then divided by number of samples. So this is an example on how to calculate the mean deviation. For example, the diastolic blood pressure of 10 individuals was as follows. These are the diastolic blood pressure. Then we have to find the mean deviation. So this is diastolic pressure, that is x. Then arithmetic mean, that is n. How you have calculated this arithmetic mean? This is how mean is equal to the total of this is 810, then divided by number of samples because the total number of samples are 10. So 810 divided by 10 is equal to 81. So this is mean. So this we have to put it here. Then deviation, that is how this data is deviating from this. How much is the deviation? So when you subtract this 83 minus 81, you will get 2. So this data is deviating from the mean is about 2 factors. Then this data is deviating from the mean about this minus 6. Then this is the original and this is, so 81 minus 81 is 0. Like that we have to calculate for all the values whatever you got and subtract with the mean. So after subtracting, you have to neglect these signs like here minus 6, minus 2, minus 10. Then you have to sum up this, you will get 56. So the mean deviation is this 56 and divided by total number of samples, that is 10. So 56 by 10 is 5.6. But my doubt is 81 is the mean, 5.6 is the mean deviation. So here we are neglecting the signs. So if I calculate like plus or minus 5.6, if it is 81 plus 5.6 is 86.6, but it's not going, but our maximum value is 95. But if I calculate 81 plus or minus 5.6, it is coming around 86. So we can't tell this is an exact measurement of dispersion. If it is giving the maximum value 95, then we can conclude yes, this data is spreading from this to this. Even though if I subtract 81 minus 5.6, it will be somewhere around 76, but our minimum value is 71. So this is not an exact measurement of dispersion. Coming to standard deviation. Standard deviation is most frequently used measure of deviation. In simple terms, it is defined as root mean square deviation. It is denoted by Greek letter sigma or by initial SD. SD is equal to square root of summation x minus x bar whole square divided by n. This is applicable only when n is less than 30, that is sample size less than 30. SD is equal to square root of summation x minus x bar whole square divided by n minus 1, and this is applicable when n is greater than 30. And this is the normal curve, and here you have to keep it in mind that when the standard deviation is between -1 and +1, then the values it will have around 68%. So in all the data you are collected, if the standard deviation between -1 to 1, then it will have 68% of your data. If the standard deviation is +2 to -2, that is here to here, then your most of the data is about 95% of the data will be in this area. When the standard deviation is -3 to +3, then the most of the data will be 99%. So in most of our studies, we will keep 95% confidence interval. That means the data will be +2 to -2, that is 95%. This is standard normal curve. I have already told you, if you want to measure the mean height of batch 22, there are 29 people. Monday you went and measured the first time, that time you will get height as 5.5. The second day you went, 2 of them are absent, that time number of samples were 27, you measure, you got 5.2 as the mean. Third day you went and you measure, another 2 are absent, you will get only 23 samples, that time you measure, you will get 5. Like that, each time if you measure, you will get different means or curve. So our assumption is, if you repeat same sample for 95 times, you will get the mean somewhere here, because these are many curves you got after sampling the same samples. So this, then you have to calculate standard deviation for this. Whatever the standard deviation you got for the standard normal curve is nothing but standard error. So standard error of statistics is the standard deviation of the sampling distribution on estimate of that standard deviation. If the parameter of the statistics is the mean, it is called standard error of mean. It's given by formula standard deviation by square root of n. N is the sample. For example, the same, this is the diastolic pressure of a person, and this is the deviations. Here we are squaring this deviation. 2 square is 4, 6 square is 36, 0 square is 0, 2 square is 4, 10 square is 100. Like that we are squaring all the deviations, and total you are calculating. So substituting these values to the formula to find out the standard deviation, that is square root of summation x minus x bar whole square divided by n minus 1. Here we are taking n minus 1 because sample size is more. So after substituting, this is for 482 is the x minus x bar value. So we are substituting here, and 10 is the sample size, so 10 minus 1 is the 9. So you are getting square if you divide 482 by 9, you will get 53.5. So square root of 53.5 is somewhere around 7.31. For the present, we may contend with the basic significance of standard deviation, that is an abstract number that it gives us an idea of the spread of dispersion, that the larger the standard deviation, the greater the dispersion of values about the mean. So this is somewhat okay in measuring the dispersion, and we use most commonly the standard deviation to measure the dispersion. Coming to the next factor, that is variance. Average of square deviation of values from the mean, that is sample variance. For example, summation x minus x bar whole square divided by n minus. Only thing is you have not put square root. That square root is here. So that is nothing but variance. Coming to coefficient of variation. The coefficient of variation, that is CV, is the ratio of standard deviation to the mean. This S is standard deviation, this is mean, and you are expressing in percentage. So the higher the coefficient of variation, the greater the level of dispersion around the mean. It is generally expressed as the percentage. The lower value of the coefficient of variation, the more precise the estimate. So always this value should be less, and then you can tell whatever data you have collected, it's precise. Come to covariance. The sample of covariance measures the strength of the linear relationship between two variables called bivariate data. Only concerned with the strength of relationship, no causal effect is implied. Covariance between two random variables, that is co x comma y, is greater than 0, that is x and y tend to move in the same direction. Covariate of x comma y when it's less than 0, and x and y tend to move in the opposite direction. When the covariate of x comma y is 0, that means x and y are independent. This is coefficient of correlation. It is measures the relative strength of linear relationship between two variables. I have already discussed in the previous lecture class. This is x-axis, this is y-axis, this is independent variable, this is dependent variable. So our coefficient of correlation measures how this dependent variable changes on imparts changes on independent variable. Sorry, independent variable changes dy by dx, that is differentiation of independent variable, will also either increase or decrease in the value of dependent variable. Sample of coefficient correlation, it's unit free, ranges between -1 to +1. The closer to -1, the stronger the negative relation. The closer to 1, the stronger the positive relation. Closer to 0, that means it's weaker or no relation. So for example, this is positive correlation because 0.4 plus 0.4, and this is R0, this means no relations, and R minus 0.4, that means it's going down, it's negative correlation. Coming to statistical assumptions. In statistical analysis, all parametric tests assume some certain characteristics about the data, also known as assumptions. Violation of this assumption change the conclusion of research and interpretation of results. Typical assumptions are normality, homogeneity of variance, linearity, and independence. Coming to tests of significance. These are our assumptions. First is normality. Coming to description of normality, the data have normal distribution. See, whatever data you have collected, we always think that data is following normal curve, but we don't know. To check that whether the data is following normal curve or not, we have to do this test. That is chi-square, Kolmogorov, Smirnov test or Shapiro-Wilk test. By doing this test, it will plot our data and it will show how the data is varying. So that it shows normality. This is very important because if your data is not following the normality, means our assumption won't work. So you have to change in some of the things before calculating the mean or doing the analysis. The second assumption is homogeneity of the variance. Here, data from multiple groups have the same variance. For example, if you want to measure the difference in height, whether there is a difference in height of batch 21, batch 22 or 23, and our assumption is homogeneity of the variance. That means batch 21 is independently differ than batch 22 or batch 23 in their heights. That is our second assumption, homogeneity of variance. So comparison of the graphs, then comparison of the variance standard deviation, then statistics test. If two groups are there, then you have to use unpaired t-test. If the same group, if you are measuring 2 times, then you have to use pair t-test. Coming to the third assumption, that is linearity. This is for correlation. So here data have linear relationship, that is independent and dependent data have linear relationship. Graphically, using scatter diagram or statistical test, two variable correlation or regression, more than two variables, multiple regression we have to use. That means there will be more than two variables. For example, dental caries, it's a dependent factor. It depends on sugar consumption, it depends on time, it depends on oral hygiene. So multiple factor. When multiple factors are there, you have to use multiple regression. And the single factor means that you are measuring only about oral hygiene and dental caries. Then here it will be oral hygiene, here it is dental caries. So that time you can use only regression or correlation. Then the fourth assumption is independence. Data are independent. Whether you collect how much of our data, but all the data are independent. So statistical test is correlation or unpaired data variables. Then comes your application of statistical assumption. When data satisfy the assumption, use parametric test. That means if data is following normal curve, you use parametric test. If data is not following normal curve, go for non-parametric test. Another approach of addressing the problem is assumption is by transforming the data. You can standardize the data, even though sometimes if you are getting data which are not following the normal curve, then you can standardize the data so that you have to find out the constant and you have to multiply all the data with that constant, and you can make the data to follow normal curve. These are the classification of parametric and non-parametric test, parametric test and non-parametric. Pair t-test. The non-parametric version of pair t-test is Wilcoxon sum rank test. And unpaired t-test, the non-parametric version is Mann-Whitney test. Then parametric version is Pearson correlation and non-parametric version is Spearman. Parametric of one-way analysis of variance, that is ANOVA, it is Kruskal-Wallis. So coming to difference between paired and unpaired. Paired means same person if you are measuring 2 times. For example, you are measuring if you want to measure the knowledge of batch 22 before and after finishing 4th year. So you have to measure before the commencement of 4th year, then after finishing the 4th year. So the samples are same, that is batch 22, but you are measuring 2 times. That time you have to use paired data. But whatever data, if you are data you have collected is not following the normal curve, then you have to use Wilcoxon. If it is following normal curve, then pair t-test. Similarly, unpaired. Here, two groups are independent, and you want to measure is there any difference between that two group. For example, batch 22 and batch 23. So if you are measuring the difference between these two, 22 and 23, in same time, then you have to use unpaired t-test. If data is following parametric, then only you can use unpaired t-test. If it is not following normal curve, then Mann-Whitney test. This is correlation, that is independent and dependent. Is there any difference? To find out that, you are going to use Pearson correlation. Analysis of variance, here you are going to check only 2 groups, but analysis of variance will check 3 groups, that is 21, 22, 23. Past 21, 22, 23, is there any difference? For that time you have to go for ANOVA. If data is not following normal curve, then you have to go for Kruskal values. Come to statistical estimation. In statistics, estimation refers to the process by which one makes inference about the population based on information obtained from sample. This is done using sample statistics to estimate the population parameter. For example, sample means are used to estimate the population means. Because you can't select all the samples, so you are going to select only the few numbers and you will assume that samples are the representative of the whole population. So the sample proportion to estimate the population proportion. Here sample mean, samples are very less and it will give a population mean. And proportion means if you want to calculate the whole Malaysian population, then you have to take proportions. If you want to measure only for the Butterworth population, then you have to take only samples. Here it's proportion, here it's samples. An estimate of population parameter may be expressed in 2 ways, that is point estimate and interval estimate. So point estimate of the population parameter is single value of the statistics. For example, the sample mean, that is X, is point estimate of the population of mean, that is mu. Similar, this sample proportion P is a point estimate of this population proportion capital P. Example, 60% of the population of periodontitis in Malaysia. This is mean, that is U of sample X. Come to interval estimate. In interval estimate is defined by 2 numbers between which population parameter is said to lie. For example, this one, A less than X or less than B, is an interval estimate. See, here we have written 20 to 30% of the HIV patient have periodontitis in Malaysia. This interval 20 to 30, it may be 25 also, 26 also, 29 also. So you are expressing the mean in interval. That is nothing but interval estimate. Confidence interval means that if the same population is sampled on numerous occasions and interval estimate are made on each occasions, the resulting intervals would bracket the true population parameter in approximately 95% of the cases. Confidence intervals used for interval estimates are preferred to point estimates because confidence intervals indicate precision of estimate and the uncertainty of the estimate. For example, the point estimate of prevalence of caries in age group of 15 to 30 years in Malaysia was found to be 30%. From the sample survey, this point estimate had a 5% margin of error and a confidence level of 95%. See, here the estimation is 30% for a group of population between 15 to 30 years age group. If you repeat that 95 times, because 95% confidence, you have told 95% confidence interval. If you repeat 95 times, you will get the same value 30. In the meantime, you have kept 5% margin of error. So this 30% may vary between 5. That is 30 plus or minus 5%. That is confidence interval. Maybe it's lying between 95 to 35 when you repeat 95 times. I hope you understood what I mean. Coming to parts of confidence interval, there are 3 parts: confidence level, sample statistic, and margin of error. Here, confidence level describes the uncertainty of the sampling method. Sample statistics describe the value of the precision. Margin of error describes the range of precision. Confidence level is the probability part of confidence interval. Confidence level describes the likelihood that a particular sampling method will produce a confidence interval that includes the true population parameter. Example, suppose we collect all the possible samples from a given population and computed confidence interval for each sample. Some confidence interval would include the true population parameter, others would not. For example, 95% confidence means 95% of the population you have selected will have intervals would include the true population parameter, but 5% will not have same confidence interval. Similarly, here 97 means 97% your value will whatever data you collected will match with the sampled population parameter, other 3% will not. Similarly for 99%, but can't be 100% because you will have some bias or in selection. If it is to be 100%, that means you have to select the whole population, not the sample. A 95% confidence level means that there is 95% likelihood that sample statistic will contain the true population parameter. A 90% confidence level means that the 90% of the intervals contain the population parameter. So this is the normal curve. We will assume always do 5% error. So only our study is 95% accurate. So other 5% is divided, that this is 2.5 and this is 2.5. If the data are here that are extreme values, so these values won't give our results correctly. We are only assuming we will do this much errors. This is error free data and this is error data. So in standard deviation also, if it is 2 standard deviation, for example, 1 standard deviation is 65%, the second standard deviation is 95%, so our data will be within the second deviations. Common levels of confidence. Commonly used confidence levels are 90%, 95% and 99%. So if assume your confidence level is 80%, then confidence coefficient 1 minus alpha is 0.80 and z value 1.28 means the z means the area of this normal curve is 1.28. So somewhere 1.28 means somewhere here in the negative side and somewhere here in the positive side. That is 80% confidence interval. So I think this one I have drawn. Yeah, this is 80%. If it is 90%, then z value is 1.62. So it will be somewhere here, 1.62. So this will be somewhere here. Then 95 means z value is 1.96. That means it's almost near to 2. That is this. We already described this in standard deviation. Go back and check once. Coming to margin of error, in confidence interval, the range of values above and below the sample statistics is called margin of error. Example, the point estimate of the prevalence of caries in age group 15 to 30 years in Malaysia was found to be 30% from the sample survey. This point estimate had a 5% margin of error and confidence level of 95%. That means 95% and 5% margin. So what we can think is 30% means it may have 5% margin of error. So 30 plus 5 is 35. 30 minus 5 is 25. So the range is, if you get 30% prevalence means the range may be 25 to 35 at 95% confidence interval and 5% error. Coming to the hypothesis. statement of belief used to evaluation of population values. Hypothesis testing. A statistical hypothesis is an assumption about a population parameter. This assumption may or may not be true. Hypothesis testing refers to the population procedure used to accept or reject the statistical hypothesis. There are two types of statistical hypothesis. First is null hypothesis. First is null, second is alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis, the null hypothesis denotes by H0 or H0, is usually a hypothesis that sample observation result purely from chance and there is no difference between the sample observation. In the meantime, the alternate hypothesis is denoted by H1 or HA is the hypothesis that sample observations are influenced by some non-random cause and therefore there is a difference between sample observations. If I give example, you will come to know what is alternate and null hypothesis. So hypothesis testing. Statistical hypothesis can be comparison between two or more groups for difference between the groups, then association between two or more groups, then prediction of outcome. Coming to step 1, that is in any research, that is setting the null hypothesis, states that there is no real difference between the means or proportion of groups being compared. For example, if you want to measure the height, difference in height of batch 22 and 23, what is our null hypothesis is no difference between the height of batch 22 or 23. That is our null hypothesis. And what is our alternative hypothesis? There is a difference between heights of batch 22 and batch 23. So we have to always start with null hypothesis. There is no difference. That is like negative. And if you got difference after doing the study, then you reject the null hypothesis and then accept the alternate hypothesis. So I already told you what is alternate hypothesis. Come to errors in testing hypothesis. Results based on the population, that is null hypothesis. Results based on the sample, whether you are going to accept or reject. So null hypothesis is true and you have accepted, that is correct decision, that is true negative. Then null hypothesis is true but you have rejected, that is type 1 error, that is false positive. This is an example. When null hypothesis is false and you have accepted, that is type 2 error. This is very severe. When null hypothesis is false and you have rejected, then it's correct decision, that is true positive. Here you can see two types of error. One is type 1 error, that is false positive error, and type 2 error, that is false negative error. Here it's an example of type 1 and this is an example for type 2 error. This is the male patient. Doctor is telling you are pregnant. So that is type 1 error, false positive. Type 2 error is a female patient, she is a pregnant, but doctor is telling you are not a pregnant. So this is very severe error. Type 1 error, to reject a null hypothesis when it is actually true, that is, to state that there is a difference when there is none, is known as type 1 error or alpha error. Type 1 error is considered to be less serious than type 2 error. The significant level, also denoted as alpha, is the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true. For example, a significance levels of 0.05 indicates a 5% risk, concluding that a difference exists when there is no actual difference. Type 2 error, when the null hypothesis is not rejected, when in fact there is a real difference between the group, it is called type 2 error or beta error or false negative error. An example of false negative is when doctor informs a patient that she is free of hepatitis B when actually she is infected with it. The result showed a negative result, but the test is false. See, these things are very difficult to understand. You should, then only you can understand, or else you can contact me, I will explain you. Step 2, compute the value of test statistics. For example, if you want to find the difference between the heights of two groups, that is 22 or 23. So that time you have to measure the difference in the heights of the mean heights of the two groups, then standard error. I already told you how to calculate standard error in the previous slides. To find the difference between two groups, you have to find means, proportion or parameter. Then to determine whether the statistics falls in critical area. These are critical areas. This is the normal curve of the batch 22. This is the normal curve of the batch 23. This is critical value because your assumption 95%. That means this area is full. The exact data. These are outliers. If your critical value is somewhere here, this is 95%, then you are unable to here if it is exactly at this, then you can reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternate hypothesis. If your value is the alpha value is somewhere here, then means you have to accept the null hypothesis and you can't able to reject the alternate hypothesis. So tests of the significance. When the z-score means the area. We already discussed the area of normal curve is 1. The z-score or t-value false if you are doing t-test. This is t-value. If you are doing ANOVA, this is ANOVA's value. Z is nothing but depending on the test. For t-test, Z is t. For ANOVA, that is f. False critical region, we reject the null hypothesis. This is critical region. And this is, for example, if t value is 2.5, I will show you in the next slide how we define the t values. Null hypothesis, this is when we are sure that observed difference does not occur by chance, otherwise could be occurring through chance. So these are critical areas. If your alpha p value is greater than this, then you are unable to reject null hypothesis. If your p value is less than this, then you are rejecting the null hypothesis and accepting alternate hypothesis. Statistical significant level and non-significant level corresponds to the area of the critical region. It does not correspond to the area of critical region. Unusually small area where the test statistics falls into. This is located in the middle portion of the curve. See, this is unusually small area, rejecting region. You have to reject the null hypothesis. This area should fall here. Your data should fall here. Infrequent occurrence deemed unusual. Here, when the statistics falls in this area, then we can't reject the null hypothesis and you have to accept null hypothesis. So if your data area is somewhere here, if z value or t value are somewhere here, then you are unable to reject null hypothesis. Your data value should be always here, then only you can reject null hypothesis. Step 3, obtain table value at given level of significance and for given number of degrees of freedom. For example, in t-test there will be two groups. One is, for example, batch 23 and 22. There are two groups. So let us consider batch 23 arranged in horizontal and batch 22 arranged in vertical. So R is row minus 1, column minus 1. That is batch 23 samples minus 1, batch 22 samples minus 1. So if the total batch 22 is 29 means you have to take minus 1, that is 28. So it will be the R minus 1 value is 28. And C minus 1, for example, this is 19. So 19 minus 1 is 18. So this value will become 18 and this value will become 28. So this is how you are going to guess the value of degrees of freedom for two samples or two group of samples. Use standard tables like Z and T or F or X square distribution tables to find the critical values. For t-test, the degrees of freedom is determined by using, for example, df, the total number of sample. If I consider batch 23, there are 19. So degrees of freedom it will be like total sample is 19 minus 1, it's 18. And I have come to know that t value is 2.101. So I have to search degrees of freedom. This is the vertical line is degrees of freedom. So degrees of freedom 18, and at 95% confidence interval, this is 95%. I have to check my value somewhere here 2.1. So 2.1 is the critical value or the t value, and p value is for two tail it's 0.05 and for the one tail is 0.25. So you can reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternate hypothesis. Similarly, for F distribution, that is ANOVA, you have to calculate the degrees of freedom. I already mentioned in the previous slide, that is row minus 1 into column minus 1. So using that formula, you can find the degrees of freedom. And how to find the critical value, the best explained in this link. Please click on this link and you can find a good video which will demonstrate how to find the critical value of F corresponding to the numerator degrees of freedom and denominator degrees of freedom, because in ANOVA there are multiple samples, or three types of means will be there. So you will have different type of degrees of freedom for each samples. For example, batch 23, this is the sample, batch 22, this is the sample. So this will be the degrees of freedom for different sample. So you watch this video in the link. You will come to know how to determine the critical value in ANOVA. So the step 4 is compare the calculated test statistics value, for example t value or z value or f value, with that of table value, whatever value you obtained, and the table values. In the previous slide I have given the table of t and f both. So compare it and check. Then the next is draw a conclusion. Reject the null hypothesis if the calculated value is greater than the table value, or accept the null hypothesis if it is calculated value is greater than the table value. So you have to check the value whatever you have calculated and the table value, and with the reference of degrees of freedom and p value. Let us discuss what is one tail and two tail. Now, for example, one tail, a test of statistical hypothesis where the region of rejection is on only one side of the sampling distribution. Here, rejection is at one side. For example, suppose the null hypothesis states that mean is less than or equal to 10. The alternate hypothesis would be the mean is greater than 10. The region of rejection would consist of range of numbers located on the right side of the sampling distribution, that is set of number greater than 10. Okay, forget about this. I will give one more example. For example, you have invented a new drug to decrease the blood pressure. I am repeating, you have invented a new drug which will decrease the blood pressure. For example, my blood pressure is 140. I am telling about systolic blood pressure. So after taking your tablet, it may reduce to 120. So it's only I am considering the decreasing one, 140 to 120. It will decrease. So that is one-sided. And if I invented the drug, which will, I don't know whether it will decrease or increase the BP. So that time I have to calculate both the things. So I have to measure this tail also. That is two tail. But right now I am measuring only one tail because I know my drug will reduce the blood pressure. So I will take only one tail. Coming to two tail, a test of statistical hypothesis where the region of rejection is on both sides of the sampling distribution is called two-tail test. Here the rejection is on both sides, here and here. For example, if you have invented a muscle protein powder, you don't know whether it will decrease or increase the girth of muscle. That time you have to calculate both the tail. For example, this is for increasing or decreasing muscle mass, and this is for increasing muscle mass. So that time you have to consider both that time. So this is nothing but two-time test. Previously we have discussed one-time test using blood pressure tablet example. So p-value, it measured to see if the difference observed in the study could have occurred by chance or not. See, if your study result, that is t value, f value, is falling here, then it's by occur by chance. So you can't able to reject the null hypothesis. If your t value, f value are falling here, then you are rejecting the null hypothesis and accepting alternate hypothesis. That's what we have described here. Measure to see if the difference observed in the study could be have occurred by chance or not. If it is occurred by chance, means you are unable to reject null hypothesis. Null hypothesis either accepted or rejected. The small the p-value, that is alpha value, could suggest that this is less than 5% probability of observing difference as larger than that observed in the study sample. Leads to rejection of null hypothesis in favor of the research hypothesis. Research hypothesis means alternate hypothesis. The investigator must choose the appropriate significant criteria on which to make that decision. You have to fix before only whether your collection of data is 95% correct or 99% correct. If it is 95%, then it is 0.05. If it is 99%, then it is 0.01. If you have decided that 99% confidence interval, then this critical value will shift to somewhere here. Both the significant, that is p-value is less than 0.05 for 95% confidence interval, and non-significant p-value should be provided so that the reader can judge the significant level. When you are reporting anything, you have to tell whether you have set the confidence interval at 95% or 90%. If you have told that 95% confidence interval, then the reader will, like for example, you have done the research. If I am reading, then I will think, oh, this data is 95%. They have calculated for 95% confidence interval, so p-value should be 0.001. Like that I will imagine. So you have to report this also at what percent confidence interval in your publications or in your report. This is an example where the intelligent quotient of the population is 100. For example, assume the intelligent quotient of the whole Malaysian is 100 and standard deviation is 16. If I want to check my selected sample, for example, batch 23, I got to know that the mean IQ of batch 23 is 108 and sample size is 16. Now I have to check, is the sample mean, that is B23, significantly differ from the population mean, that is the whole Malaysian mean. So is there any difference? By looking at the values, that 100 and 108, you may think there is a difference, but you have to prove that through the statistics, whether it is different or not. For this, I can think the H0, that is null hypothesis, is the sample mean, that is Malaysian intelligent quotient mean, is not significantly different than 100, or there is no difference between Malaysian mean IQ and batch 23 IQ. That is my null hypothesis. Alternate hypothesis will be there is a difference between Malaysian intelligent quotient and batch 23 intelligent quotient. So there is a formula, Z is equal to x bar minus mu naught divided by standard error, that is, this is symbol for standard deviation and this is for sample size. So I am going to substitute these values, that is population mean 100, population standard deviation 16, sample mean 108, sample size 16. So after substituting this value, for example, x bar, that is the mean of batch 23, that is 108, and the mean of the whole population, that is 100, so I will put it here, divided by standard deviation, that is ST is 16 for the population and sample size of the batch 23 is 16, so I will put it here. So by substituting all this value, I will get z score as 2. So by this graph you can make out this is a normal curve. My population mean is 100 somewhere here, but my batch 23 sample mean is somewhere here. So I got the z value, that is 2, by using this formula. Now we have to find out this 2, the critical value, will able to reject the null hypothesis or not. That I will explain in the next slide. So from the previous slide, we came to know that the critical value is 2, that is z value is 2, corresponds to the 0.977. That is, if this whole area is 1, our z value 2 corresponds to 0.9, that is 0.9. This is 0.9 area. The whole area is 1. So 1 minus 0.9, it will give 0.022. So this is 0.022. This is p value or alpha value. So when the p value is 0.022, definitely we are rejecting the null hypothesis and accepting the alternate hypothesis. So we may tell in the end the mean IQ of the population, that is 100, is definitely differ for the batch 23, which is on 108. Now the question is, how small should be the p-value to reject the null hypothesis? So this alpha minus significant level is the probability of rejecting null hypothesis when null is true. Is the p-value smaller than alpha? P-value greater than alpha is equal to greater than accept the null hypothesis. If p-value greater than alpha, accept the null hypothesis. If the p-value less than alpha, reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternate hypothesis. This is what we are telling. The whole area is 1. If your p-value is greater than 0.05, then your critical value fall in this place. So you are unable to reject the null hypothesis. You have to accept the null hypothesis and reject the alternate hypothesis. If your p-value is less than 0.05, then your critical area will be somewhere here. So you can reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternate hypothesis. This is for two-sided alternate hypothesis. Null hypothesis, that is Malaysian mean is 100, alternate hypothesis sample mean is not equal to 100. So z, we already know z is equal to 2 and area to the right is 0.028. This is that value 0.0228. Then the p value we already decided, but for the two-sided we have not decided. So how to decide for the p value for the two-sided? We have to multiply this with this, or you have to just add this with this. So 0.0228 into 2 is 0.0456. Again, it's less than 0.05. So here also you have rejected the null hypothesis and accepted the alternate hypothesis. So it is significant. There is a difference between sample mean of Malaysian IQ is 100 and batch 23 mean is 108. So there is a difference between the intelligence quotient of the whole sample and batch 23.